Welcome to PatsCast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Gerard Mayo, in his interview this week at the NFL owners meeting, said it's no longer a three-quarterback draft. Remember, going into this draft, we all saw Caleb Williams is going to go number one at the Chicago Bears. Drake May, he's been 1-2 with Caleb Williams for the past couple years now. Everyone's been saying that. And then Jayden Daniels, with his incredible athleticism, his incredible speed, and decent pocket passing acumen, strong arm, won the Heisman Trophy. So we all said, okay, there's three top guys. Patriots are probably getting one of those guys, considering they're at third overall, need a QB. But just 3 days after the University of Michigan's Pro Day, where J.J. McCarthy impressed a ton of people, Gerard Mayo makes this comment. So certainly J.J. McCarthy is among those top 5 quarterbacks. He makes that list, and he's shot up most NFL mock draft boards over the last month or so. And it's easy to forget, just a couple months ago, McCarthy, even after he won the national championship game at Michigan, was considered a day 2 guy. So what's changed? People are having a hard time accepting, after watching McCarthy all season, University of Michigan, on all the premier games on TV, because they were the national champion, didn't lose a game all season, playing all those tough Big Ten teams, and under Jim Harbaugh, they're not willing to accept that J.J. McCarthy may indeed be one of the better quarterbacks in this draft, maybe even potentially the number 2 QB behind Caleb Williams. But let me go into some of the pros and cons a little bit about J.J. McCarthy and why I think teams are starting to think this, particularly after his impressive pro day on Friday at the University of Michigan. First off, of all the quarterbacks, even Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy has the best footwork. He is the most polished. He's played the most under center than any of these quarterbacks. You watch him and you go, all right, this looks like a guy that's been in the NFL for years. All his mechanics are very impressive. Yeah, maybe he winds up a little much when he throws the ball. But for the most part, a pretty quick release. Footwork is tremendous. He had maybe the most accurate deep ball of all of the quarterback pro days so far. Now, Drake May is still yet to have a pro day that's taking place tomorrow, so we'll see. But compared to Caleb Williams, compared to what we saw from Jayden Daniels today, J.J. McCarthy was hitting guys right in the center of their chest. Didn't matter if it was short, intermediate, or deep throws. He was hitting them all. He's also used to NFL-style coaching under Jim Harbaugh, obviously coached the San Francisco 49ers for a while, and has the most experience taking snaps under center, as I've said before. And that is a major adjustment for college quarterbacks. All of these guys are lining up in the shotgun on nearly every play. I think Caleb Williams has taken something like 9 snaps under center, and those are probably all like goal line plays. So with a run-heavy offense like they've had at Michigan, J.J. McCarthy is used to that a lot more than the rest of these quarterbacks. Not to mention, Jim Harbaugh absolutely raves about the guy, has a great reputation, not just in college, but in the NFL. Certainly earned his new NFL job with the LA Chargers. Harbaugh says he is the best quarterback in this draft, even better than Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jayden Daniels. But I think perhaps most importantly, J.J. McCarthy is a winner. He came up big in the college football semifinal, the Rose Bowl game against Alabama. Game went back and forth down the stretch, and McCarthy made the big plays when he needed to make them, despite them being a run-first offense. Threw a lot in that game and really came through in the clutch. And don't forget the national championship game against Michigan, where they ran away with it in the final two quarters. And when it comes to leadership, he probably tops the list among all the top QB prospects, maybe alongside Drake May. A lot of people have said Drake May is a solid leader, but Jayden Daniels, kind of a quiet, introverted type of guy, and Caleb Williams has a bit of a reputation of being a diva. He's in all these commercials, lived in a penthouse in Los Angeles, the highest paid college athlete of all time. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I'm fairly certain, at least in terms of endorsements, this guy's been raking in the dough for a couple of years now. Let's also not forget, when you compare it to Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May, they all play in warm weather cities. Michigan is a cold place to play. You're playing at Ohio State. You're playing in the Midwest. You're playing these games late into November. He's experienced in that type of environment. For a team like the Patriots that has to play in Foxborough, that's something you have to consider. I mean, Mac Jones wasn't used to the cold. Bailey Zappi, maybe a little bit more used to the cold, but that is a big factor. I mean, certain quarterbacks don't have the same zip on the ball when it's below 20 degrees or when it's below zero, which often happens in some of these December and January NFL games, especially in the big playoff games. You got to go into Buffalo and you got to win in that environment where it snows pretty much every day, it seems, in the winter coming off of the lake. He's tough. I mean, as I said, he wins big games. He's won big games in tough, freezing cold road environments, some of the loudest, heaviest capacity crowds that, you're going to see more in the stands, louder fans than you are even in the NFL. J.J. McCarthy has won pretty much all of those games. And also, and I'm not as sure about this as some of the other quarterbacks. I don't know if they're going to do Wonderlic tests and all those things, but J.J. McCarthy is considered to be a high IQ quarterback, one of the highest in this draft, and that certainly is a factor. Like, he's going to be able to learn and pick up different offenses very quickly. And I've heard a lot of people say what Michigan ran in the college football playoff was drastically different from what they ran in the regular season. And that was something J.J. McCarthy was able to pick up from Jim Harbaugh in just a few weeks. And that's what you want, especially for a team like the Patriots. I know Bill Belichick isn't there anymore, but Gerard Mayo may be similar to Belichick. He's going to have that game plan evolve week to week based on their opponent, and you want a smart quarterback there that's going to be able to adjust to that game plan. Now, I understand the criticisms about J.J. McCarthy. I understand why a lot of people still think he's a second, maybe even third-round guy who's just getting boosted like a lot of quarterbacks do around NFL draft season. It's also lying season. Maybe a lot of people are floating out J.J. McCarthy so that they can trick some teams and then take another guy. I get it. And there's a lot of potential cons here. And I think the biggest one is he didn't throw the ball a lot in college. He threw the ball something like 20 times a game. Now, a lot of that was because Michigan built up massive leads. So they're up by 3 or 4 touchdowns going into halftime. J.J. McCarthy didn't even play the fourth quarter in a lot of games. I think he was taken out in the third quarter in some games. But if you're only going to throw the ball a few times and you're a run-first offense, how much does Jim Harbaugh actually trust him to throw the football? That's an important question. And there is the possibility here, and something that we all have to consider, that Jim Harbaugh saying that J.J. McCarthy is the best quarterback in the draft is just performing some gamesmanship here, right? If 4 quarterbacks go at the top of the draft, pick number 1, 2, 3, and 4, well, you know who has the 5th pick? The LA Chargers. Then Jim Harbaugh, who doesn't need a quarterback, has Justin Herbert, can select whomever he wants. So he could take Marvin Harrison Jr., or if he wants to get a tackle, he could take Joe Alt or one of the other top tackles. He could take Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze if he feels high about those guys. He's going to be able to pick and choose whomever he wants if the first 4 picks are quarterbacks. So let's get J.J. McCarthy's draft stock way up. Let's get one of these teams to bite. And then you have Caleb Williams going at 1. And then somewhere between 2 and 4 is Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and J.J. McCarthy. And then he gets to pick the best player available. And I'm sure he's going to like Marvin Harrison Jr. or one of these top receivers or one of these top tackles, which the LA Chargers really need. I think he would probably pick Marvin Harrison Jr., who's considered a once-in-a-generation wide receiver coming out of the draft. They traded away Keenan Allen. They lost Mike Williams. The Chargers have big needs at that position. And it's possible that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be better than both of those guys as a rookie. And you don't really have to pay him for at least 4 seasons. Pick up the 5th-year option, which is still going to be relatively cheap compared to the top receivers for a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe that's what Jim Harbaugh's doing here. He doesn't want the Arizona Cardinals to bite and get Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 4. He wants them to trade that pick back, stockpile picks, and then a quarterback's taken at 4 after the first 3 picks, and now suddenly he can get Harrison on the cheap for 4 years. I see why Jim Harbaugh's doing that. Not fooling a lot of people if that's indeed his plan. Let's also not forget that J.J. McCarthy had the best O-line and running game of all of these top quarterback prospects by far. And this is something you have to consider. Mac Jones, who, look, had a great rookie year, 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting, but he was a failure in New England. And a lot of that had to do with his development. But Mac Jones had great protection and great weapons at wide receiver, far better receiver weapons than he did with the New England Patriots. That's a cautionary tale. A guy like Drake May has worked with much less than Jaden Daniels, who had 2 or 3 really great wide receivers, probably a better offensive line than Drake May, that's for sure. Caleb Williams, not a great O-line, but has had a lot of weapons over the last few years. I'd say he had much more to work with than Drake May in North Carolina. And while J.J. McCarthy may not have had the best receivers, he still had Roman Wilson out there. He still had a great running back and had by far the best offensive line. So there's a good chance he's going to go from the best offensive line in college football to one of the worst if he goes at the top of the draft to a team like the Commanders or the Patriots, who are rebuilding both of their O-lines. Commanders had, I think, the worst O-line in all of football last season. Patriots, they're rebuilding. They don't really have a left tackle. They're not going to get a tackle till at least early in the second round. And if they wait till the third round, that guy's probably not even going to be able to start. So that's something that also has to be considered. Now, as mentioned, J.J. McCarthy, many thought is a day 2 guy at least a couple of months ago. Even after he won the national championship game, people thought, well, you can get McCarthy probably in the second round. Is he getting late hype as the draft gets closer, similar to Zach Wilson, who shot way up the boards and turned out to be a bust with the New York Jets? I've heard a lot of people compare J.J. McCarthy to Zach Wilson. I don't see it personally, but it is a concern. And then you got to compare him to the other 3 top quarterbacks. He doesn't have the instincts of a Caleb Williams, although I'd probably put him at second on the list when it comes to the instincts category. Certainly doesn't have the size or the arm strength of a Drake May, and doesn't have the speed of a Jaden Daniels. So you're getting a guy at some of the most important categories who's not the best there. And that's something you have to consider as well. So this is a tough decision by the New England Patriots if they can take J.J. McCarthy, but I'm not even sure they're going to have the opportunity because according to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero said he's talked to a number of executives around the league, and he says the Washington Commanders, particularly under their new GM Adam Peters, really like J.J. McCarthy and they want to take him at number 2. So if that's the case, well, the Patriots are going to be able to pick and choose between Drake May and Jaden Daniels, assuming they don't trade back and stay at number 3 and want to take a quarterback there, which if they stay at 3, in all likelihood, they are taking a QB. Now, don't read too much into pro days. I get it. Pro days are designed to show the highlights, the strengths of all these quarterbacks. It is not the reason you draft a player, but they still are somewhat important. And if that is the case, and the Commanders do want to take J.J. McCarthy at number 2, and the Patriots have the chance to pick either Jaden Daniels or Drake May, well, Pats certainly are interested in both those guys. They had 9 people representing the Patriots at LSU's Pro Day today. And the few clips that I've watched, Jaden Daniels looked decent, but I must say, compared to J.J. McCarthy, didn't look as comfortable under center as McCarthy did. And he missed on a couple of deep balls that McCarthy didn't do. His footwork, I'd say, was pretty solid. Certainly going to be better than Drake May during his pro day tomorrow, but not as good as J.J. McCarthy's. I'm not even sure Jaden Daniels is as elusive in the pocket. I know he's more mobile, but not as elusive specifically in the pocket as J.J. McCarthy. He can certainly compensate for that. Like, when he decides to run, when Jaden Daniels decides to run, he might be the quickest I've ever seen at accelerating, getting that quick burst of speed, and finding a running lane. So he can compensate for that, right? Like, he may not have the polished footwork of McCarthy, who can quickly evade pass rushers and then get a throw off. But Jaden Daniels, when he decides to run, he runs and he goes. And you don't need the best footwork if you can get 2 steps quicker than any of these quarterbacks. I think he can burst out of the pocket and find a running lane, frankly, faster than Lamar Jackson can at this moment. And that is a huge strength of Jaden Daniels. So another thing you have to consider, right? But clearly the Patriots and the Commanders were very impressed by J.J. McCarthy at his pro day this past Friday. Look, I'm going to need to see some more tape. I've only seen a few clips of Jaden Daniels' Wednesday pro day at LSU. I don't think there was anything too concerning from what I saw, But I got to say, from what I've seen, he did not look as polished as J.J. McCarthy did. Now, that's not the only thing the Pats and Commanders are going to value. Again, pro days, not a major, heavily weighted variable when it comes to deciding who you're going to draft, but Daniels is certainly a much better athlete. Drake May has physical gifts that none of these quarterbacks have, even Caleb Williams. And Drake May also comes from a great family of football players and basketball players. He's the youngest of these top prospects. Jane Daniels has a couple years on him. J.J. McCarthy's on the young side. But look, it's possible that the Patriots, they're going to North Carolina tomorrow for Drake May's pro day. They go there. They're going to have their entire cohort there, similar to what they did at LSU. They had a lot of people representing the Patriots at Michigan just this past Friday. They go there and they think Drake May's footwork isn't great. He's not as accurate as some of these other quarterbacks that we've seen. A lot of raw talent there, but maybe a bit too raw. And look, I know you have Jacoby Brissett as kind of this bridge guy. Perhaps he's going to start week 1, but do you really want this guy sitting on the bench for, we're saying like one season and then he goes in, but Drake May, he may have to sit longer than that. And you could get a guy like J.J. McCarthy who maybe doesn't have the high ceiling of Drake May, but he certainly doesn't have the low floor of Drake May. And I think he could win that quarterback competition at training camp. I think Jane Daniels could win that quarterback competition at training camp, even if he isn't as polished at making second and third reads as some of these other quarterbacks are. Like, I would not be stunned when all's said and done. The Patriots go to these pro days. They have their top 30 visits. They finish their evaluations at some point in early to mid-April. And they say, look, the top 2 QBs that we think are going to be available, we're going to write off Caleb Williams right now. Our top 2 quarterbacks in either order are J.J. McCarthy and Jane Daniels. And then Drake May drops the third. And if that's the case, they're getting one of those top 2 guys, J.J. McCarthy or Jane Daniels. And we've heard a lot about McCarthy going to the Commanders. Could all be smoke. A lot of people, if I had to still guess right now, I think they're going to take Jane Daniels. And if that's the case, the Patriots come out of this and they rank their quarterbacks, Jane Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, and then we put Drake May at number 3, well, then they're taking J.J. McCarthy at number 3 overall. Saw a few mock drafts that came out today that had the Patriots taking J.J. McCarthy. So this is going to be very interesting in the coming weeks. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and let me know in the comments below. Are you buying into the J.J. McCarthy hype? Do you think this is lying season? It's all smoke, and he's really going to end up falling somewhere later in the top 10, maybe even later in the first round. Or you think he's a day 2 guy like a lot of people did just a few months ago. Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts as well. We'll be back with more Patriots coverage, breaking news as it comes in. A lot to still talk about. I really want to get into the Bailey Zappi conversation because I think this is something we're not really talking about right now. We're all focusing on Jacoby Brissett and the young rookie quarterback that's going to come to New England. Where does Bailey Zappi factor into that equation? I think he could compete for that job with both of those individuals competing against him at training camp. Going to be interesting. Again, watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to like and subscribe this episode. And we'll be back with more PatsCast as the week progresses.